Right now, you understand English. You can read, you can listen, maybe even understand everything clearly. But the moment you try to speak, your mind goes blank. Your words don't come out, your sentences feel slow, and suddenly, you feel stuck again. And the most frustrating part is this: you know what you want to say, but you just can't say it. So you start thinking, maybe I'm not fluent. Maybe I still need more practice. Maybe English is just not for me. But listen carefully. None of that is true. The real problem is something no one ever told you. You were trained to understand English, but never trained to speak it. And because of that, your brain is working against you every time you try to talk. But once you see what's really happening, you will realize you were never stuck. You were just using the wrong system. And today, that changes. You trained your mind to analyze, not express. From the very beginning, English was not introduced to you as something to live or feel. It was introduced as something to study, something to get right, something to pass. You were taught to focus on rules, to remember structures, to avoid mistakes, and to always check yourself before speaking. So your brain slowly accepted this system and built a habit around it. It learned that English is something that must be controlled, something that must be correct before it is spoken. And now, without even realizing it, every time you try to speak, your brain follows the same old pattern. Instead of letting words come out naturally, it starts checking everything. It thinks about grammar, it searches for the right tense, it rearranges words, and by the time you are ready to speak, the moment has already passed. This is why your speech feels slow, heavy, and unnatural. Not because you don't know English, but because your brain is busy analyzing instead of expressing. You are not speaking freely, you are trying to build the perfect sentence inside your head before you allow yourself to say it. You are trying to be correct instead of being real. You are trying to be safe instead of being confident. And this constant need to be right is quietly blocking your flow. It is creating hesitation where there should be ease. It is creating pressure where there should be comfort. But here is the truth that can change everything for you. Language was never meant to be treated like a math problem that needs solving step by step. When you speak your native language, you don't stop to think about rules. You don't check grammar in your head. You don't build sentences slowly. You simply express what you feel, and the words come automatically. That is how real language works. It is natural, it is fast, and it is effortless. English is not different. The only difference is how you trained your mind to approach it. You trained it to think before speaking instead of speaking to think. You trained it to focus on structure instead of meaning. And because of that, your words feel delayed even though the thoughts are already inside you. What you need to understand is that fluency begins the moment you stop trying to control every word. When you allow yourself to speak without checking everything, your brain slowly starts to relax. It begins to trust itself again. It starts to move faster because it is no longer being interrupted by constant correction. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. You may feel like your sentences are not perfect, like your grammar is not clean, like your words are not exact. But this is the stage where real progress begins. Because now you are no longer training your brain to analyze language, you are training it to use language. And the more you practice speaking in this way, the more natural it becomes. Your brain starts to recognize patterns on its own. It starts to fix mistakes without stopping you. It starts to flow instead of freeze. So the goal is not to speak perfectly. The goal is to speak freely. Because once your brain shifts from analyzing every sentence to expressing every thought, something powerful happens. Your words stop feeling forced. Your speech becomes smoother, and slowly, without even noticing, you begin to sound like someone who is not trying to speak English, but someone who simply speaks. You are still thinking in another language. First, there is something happening inside your mind every time you try to speak, and most people never notice it. Before a single English word comes out of your mouth, your brain has already created the sentence in your native language. The idea is formed there first, in the language that feels safe, natural, and automatic to you. And then quietly and quickly, your mind begins the second step. It tries to convert that idea into English. This process feels normal because you have been doing it for so long. But this is the hidden reason why your speech feels slow, why your sentences break, why your confidence disappears in the middle of speaking. Because your brain is not speaking once. It is working twice. First it thinks, then it translates, then it speaks. And that extra step creates delay, pressure, and confusion. Imagine trying to run while carrying extra weight. You can still move, but it will never feel light. It will never feel smooth. That is exactly what translation is doing to your fluency. It is adding a burden your brain was never meant to carry while speaking. Fluent speakers don't go through this process. They don't build a sentence in one language and then convert it into another. They experience the thought directly in English. The idea and the words happen together at the same time without effort. That is why their speech feels fast, natural, and connected. There is no gap between thinking and speaking. But right now, in your case, there is always a gap. A small pause, a moment of searching, a feeling of being stuck between two languages. And even if you know the right words, even if you understand everything clearly, that gap makes you feel like you are not fluent. The truth is, fluency is not about knowing more vocabulary. It is about removing this gap. It is about training your brain to stay in English long enough that it no longer needs to switch back. Because every time you go back to your native language, you reset the process. Your brain returns to its comfort zone, and the cycle continues. At first, thinking directly in English will feel strange. Your sentences may be simple, your words may feel limited, and your thoughts may not come out exactly the way you want. But this is not a problem. This is the beginning of real change. Because now your brain is learning a new habit. It is learning to connect ideas directly with English words without depending on translation. You can start with small things. Describe what you see around you in English. Talk to yourself in simple sentences. Think about your day using basic words. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be advanced. What matters is that you are staying inside the language instead of jumping out of it. Slowly, something powerful begins to happen. Your brain starts forming thoughts faster. The need to translate becomes weaker. The pauses become shorter. And your speech begins to feel lighter, more natural, more real. And one day, you will notice a moment that changes everything. You will speak and realize you didn't translate first. The words just came. The thought and the sentence appeared together. And in that moment, you will understand what real fluency feels like. Because fluency is not when you can translate quickly. Fluency is when you no longer need to translate at all. You are still thinking in another language. First, there is a silent habit running inside your mind every time you try to speak English, and it is so normal to you that you almost never notice it. Before you say anything, before a single English word comes out, your brain has already created the idea in your native language. It feels quick, it feels natural, it feels automatic. But then something else happens. Your mind pauses, even if only for a second, and starts converting that idea into English. This is the hidden step that is slowing you down. You are not just speaking, you are thinking, translating, correcting, and then speaking. And all of this is happening in a few seconds inside your head. That is why your speech feels heavy. That is why your sentences break. That is why you lose your flow in the middle of talking. Because your brain is carrying extra work it was never designed to do while speaking. Think about how you speak in your own language. You don't prepare sentences in advance. You don't translate your thoughts. You don't stop to fix grammar. You simply feel something, and the words appear instantly. There is no distance between your thoughts and your voice. But with English, there is always a distance, a small gap between what you want to say and what you actually say. And that gap is where hesitation lives. That gap is where doubt enters. That gap is where fluency breaks. The truth is simple but powerful. But as long as you keep thinking in one language and speaking in another, you will always feel slow, no matter how much vocabulary you learn, no matter how many grammar rules you memorize. Because the problem is not your knowledge, the problem is the process your brain is using. Fluency begins the moment that process changes. It begins when your brain stops going back to your native language and starts staying inside English. When your thoughts begin to form directly in English, even if they are simple, even if they are not perfect, something inside you starts to shift. Your speech becomes lighter, your mind becomes faster, your confidence begins to grow without effort. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. Your sentences may feel basic, you may struggle to find words. You may feel like you are not expressing yourself fully. But this stage is not weakness. This stage is training. Because now, for the first time, your brain is building a direct connection between thought and English. And that connection is what creates real fluency. You don't need complicated sentences to become fluent. You need direct thinking. You need to stay inside the language long enough that your brain stops looking for another way. You need to allow yourself to think simple, speak simple, and remain in English without escaping back to comfort. You can start anywhere. Look around you and describe what you see in English. Talk to yourself while doing daily tasks. Think about your plans, your feelings, your ideas using basic words. It may feel slow in the beginning, but something important is happening beneath the surface. Your brain is adjusting. It is learning a new way to operate. And then, slowly, almost quietly, things begin to change. The pauses become shorter. The need to translate becomes weaker. Your sentences start forming faster without effort. You begin to respond instead of preparing. You begin to speak instead of searching. And one day you will notice a moment that feels different. You will say something in English. And for the first time, you will realize that you did not translate it. The words came directly from your mind. There was no second step, no delay, no pressure, just flow. And in that moment, you will understand something most learners never realize. Fluency is not about speaking faster after translating. Fluency is about removing translation completely. So your thoughts and your words become one. You try to speak perfectly, instead of speaking freely. Somewhere in your journey, without even realizing it, you were taught a silent rule, that speaking English means speaking correctly, that every sentence must be right, every word must be accurate, every tense must be perfect. And slowly this idea became a habit inside your mind. Now every time you open your mouth to speak, you are not just expressing a thought, you are checking it. You are judging it. You are trying to fix it before anyone hears it. And this is where your fluency begins to break. Because while you are trying to speak, your brain is busy correcting. It is asking questions like, is this the right tense? Is this the correct word? What if this sounds wrong? And in that moment, your natural flow disappears. Your confidence drops. Your voice becomes slower, softer, uncertain. You're not struggling because you don't know English. You are struggling because you are trying to control every word before it leaves your mouth. But think about this for a moment. When you speak your native language, do you aim for perfection? Do you stop in the middle of a sentence to fix your grammar? Do you rebuild your words before speaking them? No, you simply speak. And even if you make mistakes, you keep going. You express your idea first, and your brain adjusts naturally without stopping you. That is why your speech feels smooth, fast, and effortless. But with English, you have reversed this process. You are trying to be perfect first and expressive later. And this creates pressure inside your mind. It turns speaking into a test instead of a natural act. The truth is simple, but it changes everything. Fluency is not built through perfection. Fluency is built through movement. It is built when your thoughts are allowed to flow without interruption. It is built when your brain learns to keep going, even if the sentence is not perfect. Because the more you speak freely, the more your brain starts to adjust automatically. It begins to recognize patterns, fix errors, and improve your speech and without stopping your flow. But when you focus on perfection, you stop that process completely. You interrupt yourself. You slow yourself down. You create fear where there should be freedom. At first, letting go of perfection will feel uncomfortable. You may feel like your English is not good enough. You may notice mistakes more clearly. You may feel exposed. But this is not a sign of failure. This is a sign that you are finally speaking instead of hiding. And this is where real progress begins. Because every time you allow yourself to speak without overthinking, you are teaching your brain something powerful. You are teaching it that communication matters more than correctness. You are teaching it that it is safe to express without fear. And slowly your brain begins to relax. It stops overchecking. It stops slowing you down. Your sentences start to come out faster. Your voice becomes stronger. Your confidence grows naturally without forcing it. And over time, something beautiful happens. Your English starts improving on its own. Not because you are trying harder, but because your brain is finally free to learn while moving. It begins to correct mistakes in the background without interrupting your speech. It begins to shape your language through use, not through fear. So the goal is not to sound perfect. The goal is to sound real. Because the moment you stop trying to speak perfectly is the moment you finally start speaking fluently. Your brain was never trained for instant response. You have spent a lot of time with English, but think carefully about how you practiced it. You read slowly, you wrote carefully, you listened and paused, you thought before answering. Almost everything you did gave your brain time. Time to think, time to correct, time to prepare. So your brain adapted to that environment. It became comfortable with delay. It learned that speaking can wait, that answers can be built slowly, that there is always a moment to think before responding. But real conversation does not work like that. When someone speaks to you in real life, there is no pause button. There is no extra time to prepare. The moment is moving, the conversation is flowing, and your brain is expected to respond instantly. And when your brain is not trained for that speed, it begins to struggle. This is why you freeze. It's not because you don't understand. It's not because you don't know the words. It's because your brain is not used to accessing them quickly. It is searching in a system that was built for slow thinking, while the situation demands fast response. Fluency is not just about knowledge. It is about speed of access. You may have all the right words stored in your mind, but if your brain takes too long to find them, your speech will always feel broken. There will always be a pause between your thoughts and your words. And that pause creates hesitation. And hesitation creates self-doubt. But here is the powerful truth most people miss. Speed is a skill. And just like any skill, it can be trained. Your brain can learn to respond faster, but only if you give it the right kind of practice. Not slow practice, not perfect practice, but real-time practice, the kind that forces your mind to react without overthinking. You need moments where you don't give yourself time to prepare, moments where you answer quickly, even if your sentence is not perfect, moments where your brain is pushed to respond instead of calculate. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. You may feel like your words are messy, like your sentences are incomplete, like you are not expressing yourself fully. But this discomfort is exactly what your brain needs. Because now it is being trained for speed, not perfection. Slowly, something begins to change. Your brain starts finding words faster. The gaps between your thoughts and your speech begin to shrink. The hesitation becomes shorter. The flow becomes smoother. And one day, you will notice that you are no longer searching for words the way you used to. You are responding. Naturally, instantly, without pressure. Because your brain has finally adapted to real conversation. You have to understand this clearly. You don't become fluent by knowing more. You become fluent by responding faster with what you already know. So stop giving your brain too much time. Stop waiting until everything is perfect. Start answering quickly. Start speaking even when you feel unprepared. Because the moment you train your brain to move faster than your fear is the moment your fluency begins to unlock. And you practice alone, but your brain was never trained for real conversation. You have spent hours with English. You've watched videos, listened carefully, repeated sentences, maybe even practiced speaking by yourself. And in those moments, it feels like you're improving. It feels controlled, comfortable, even smooth. But then something changes the moment another person is involved. Someone asks you a simple question, and suddenly your mind slows down. The words you knew disappear. Your confidence drops. And you start wondering, why can I speak alone, but not in front of someone? The answer is simple but powerful, because practicing alone and speaking in real conversation are two completely different experiences. When you are alone, there is no pressure. No one is waiting for your response. No one is judging your words. You have time to think, time to pause, time to correct yourself. Your brain feels safe, so it performs better. But real conversation is alive. It moves quickly. It doesn't wait for you to feel ready. There is another person, another voice, another energy. And suddenly, your brain is expected to listen, understand, think, and respond, all at the same time. If you never train your mind in that environment, it will always feel overwhelmed when it finally faces it. This is why you feel stuck. Not because you don't know English, but because your brain has never been trained to use English under real conditions. Fluency is not built in silence. It is built in interaction. Your brain needs to experience unpredictability. It needs to face moments where it cannot prepare in advance, where it has to respond instantly, where it has to stay present in the conversation instead of thinking about the next sentence. Because real speaking is not about repeating what you practiced. It is about reacting to what is happening right now. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. You may feel pressure. You may feel like your words are not coming out the way you want. You may even feel embarrassed. But this discomfort is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that your brain is finally being trained in the right environment. Because every time you speak in a real situation, even if it feels messy, your brain is learning something powerful. It is learning how to stay calm under pressure. It is learning how to find words faster. It is learning how to keep going even when everything is not perfect. And slowly that pressure begins to feel normal. And the fear becomes smaller, the pauses become shorter. Your responses become more natural. Until one day, you find yourself in a conversation. And you are no longer thinking about how to speak, you are simply speaking. That is when you know something has changed. So don't rely only on practice that feels safe. Step into practice that feels real, because fluency is not built when everything is comfortable. It is built when your brain learns to stay steady inside discomfort. You are building every sentence from zero, instead of speaking in patterns. Right now, without even realizing it, every time you try to speak English, you are starting from nothing. You are treating every sentence like a new problem that needs to be solved. You are choosing each word one by one, arranging them carefully, checking if they fit together, and only then allowing yourself to speak. This is why speaking feels slow. This is why it feels heavy. This is why you lose your flow in the middle of a sentence. Because your brain is working too hard for something that should feel natural. Think about it deeply. When you speak your native language, do you build every sentence from zero? Do you stop and choose each word one by one? Do you carefully arrange structure in your mind before speaking? No. You don't build sentences. You recall them. You use patterns that are already stored in your mind. Small structures that you have used so many times that they come out automatically without thinking. I don't think so. It depends on. I feel like the reason is these are not sentences you build from scratch every time. These are patterns your brain has memorized through use, not study. And because of that, they come out instantly, smoothly, without effort. This is the secret behind fluent speech. Fluent speakers are not smarter. They are not thinking faster. They are simply not building everything from zero. They are using patterns. But in your case, you were never trained this way. You were taught vocabulary, grammar, rules, but not how to connect them into ready-made expressions that your brain can use quickly. So now every time you speak, you are forced to create instead of recall. And creation takes time. That is why even simple sentences feel difficult. That is why your speech breaks. That is why you pause in the middle of your thoughts. Because your brain is searching for structure instead of using what is already familiar. But once you understand this, everything begins to change. You don't need to build every sentence. You need to collect patterns. Patterns are like shortcuts for your brain. They allow you to express ideas without thinking about every single word. They reduce the pressure. They increase your speed. They give your speech a natural rhythm. When you start using patterns, something powerful happens. Your brain stops struggling. Your sentences start forming faster. Your confidence begins to rise without forcing it. Because now, you are not creating under pressure. You are using what already feels familiar. At first, you can begin with simple patterns, very basic ones. You don't need anything complicated. I believe, I don't understand. Can you explain? These small structures may look simple, but they are extremely powerful. And because they give your brain a starting point. Instead of thinking about the whole sentence, you already have the first part ready. And once the first part comes out, the rest follows more easily. This is how flow begins. You don't wait to build the perfect sentence. You start with a pattern and let the sentence grow naturally. Over time, as you use these patterns again and again, they become automatic. You no longer think about them. They just come out. And as your collection of patterns grows, your speech becomes richer, smoother, more flexible. You begin to speak longer sentences without effort. You begin to respond faster without panic. You begin to sound natural without trying. And slowly, speaking stops feeling like a task. It starts feeling like something you can do. You have to understand this clearly. Fluency is not about how many words you know. It is about how easily you can connect them, and patterns are what make that connection possible. So stop trying to build every sentence from zero. Stop putting your brain under unnecessary pressure. Start collecting patterns. Start using them daily. Start repeating them until they become part of you. Because the moment your brain shifts from building sentences to using patterns is the moment your speech begins to flow without thinking. Fear has quietly taken control of your voice. There is something deeper than grammar, deeper than vocabulary, deeper than practice, something invisible that is silently controlling the way you speak. It is not your knowledge that is stopping you. It is not your ability. It is fear. And the most dangerous part is you don't always recognize it as fear. It hides behind small thoughts. What if I say it wrong? What if they don't understand me? What if I sound stupid? These thoughts seem normal. They feel harmless. But slowly they start shaping your behavior. They start controlling your voice. And before you even begin speaking, your brain becomes careful. It slows down. It starts checking every word. It hesitates before every sentence. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you are trying to protect yourself from being wrong. This is where your fluency begins to break. Because speaking is not just a skill, it is an action. And fear interrupts action. Every time you feel that pressure inside your chest, every time your mind tells you to stay quiet, in every time you hold back even though you know the answer, you are not just avoiding a mistake. You are teaching your brain something dangerous. You are teaching it that speaking is unsafe. And once your brain believes that, it starts creating resistance. It makes speaking feel heavy. It makes your thoughts feel unclear. It makes your words feel distant. Even if you know exactly what you want to say, your brain will hesitate. Because it is no longer focused on expressing. It is focused on protecting. This is why you freeze in conversations. It's not because your mind is empty. It's because your mind is blocked. Blocked by the fear of judgment. Blocked by the fear of mistakes. Blocked by the fear of how you will be seen. But here is the truth that most people never accept. Every fluent speaker you admire was once uncomfortable, awkward, and full of mistakes. They said wrong sentences. They used incorrect words. They sounded unsure. But they kept speaking. They did not wait until they felt ready. They did not wait until they felt perfect. They moved through the discomfort, and because of that, their brain learned something powerful. It learned that speaking is safe. It learned that mistakes are not dangerous. It learned that communication matters more than perfection. And once that fear disappeared, fluency began to grow naturally. But in your case, fear is still present. It may not be loud, but it is there. In the hesitation, in the pauses, in the moments where you choose silence over expression. And every time you stay silent, the fear becomes stronger. Because your brain thinks, not good, we avoided risk. But what it doesn't realize is, you also avoided growth. You stayed in the same place. If you want to change this, you have to do something uncomfortable. You have to speak even when you feel unsure. You have to continue even when your sentence is not perfect. You have to allow mistakes to happen without stopping yourself. Because this is how you retrain your brain. You show it again and again that nothing bad happens when you speak imperfectly. You prove to it that communication is more important than correctness. You teach it that your voice deserves to be heard, even when it is not flawless. At first, it will feel difficult. Your heart may race. Your mind may resist. You may feel exposed. But this is not weakness. This is growth happening in real time. And slowly, something begins to shift. And the fear becomes quieter. The hesitation becomes smaller. The voice inside you that once held you back begins to lose its power. You start speaking more freely. You stop overthinking every word. You begin to trust yourself. And that trust is where fluency truly begins. Because fluency is not just about knowing how to speak. It is about allowing yourself to speak without fear. You have to understand this deeply. The problem is not that you make mistakes. The problem is that you are afraid to make them. And once that fear disappears, your words will no longer feel blocked. Your thoughts will no longer feel stuck. Your voice will no longer feel restricted. It will flow, not perfectly, but naturally, not carefully, but confidently. So stop trying to protect yourself from mistakes. Stop waiting until you feel ready. Because the moment you choose to speak despite fear is the moment fear begins to lose control over you. You consume more than you produce. And that's why your fluency feels stuck. Right now, you are surrounded by English. You watch videos, you listen to podcasts, you scroll through content, you read subtitles, you understand conversations, and sometimes you even feel like your English is improving. In those moments, it feels smooth, it feels easy, it feels like progress is happening. But then, when it is your turn to speak, something completely different happens. The words don't come out the way you expect, your thoughts feel slow, your sentences feel incomplete, and suddenly that confidence you felt while listening disappears. This is the gap that most learners never understand. You are feeding your mind with English, but you are not training your voice to use it. You are building recognition, but not expression. And these two are not the same. Understanding a language and using a language are completely different skills. One is passive, the other is active. One feels comfortable, the other requires effort. When you listen or watch English, your brain is only receiving. It is relaxed, it is observing, it is making sense of what it hears without pressure. There is no demand to respond, no need to create, no urgency to form sentences. Everything is already prepared for you. But speaking is the opposite. Speaking demands that you take everything inside your mind and bring it out in real time. It requires you to form thoughts, choose words, connect ideas, and express them instantly. If you spend most of your time only consuming English, your brain becomes very good at understanding, but it remains untrained in expressing. This creates a dangerous illusion. You start to believe that you are improving because you can understand more. But when it is time to speak, you realize that understanding alone is not enough. It is like watching someone swim every day and expecting yourself to become a swimmer. You may understand the movements, you may recognize the technique, but until you enter the water and move your own body, nothing truly changes. Speaking is that moment when you enter the water. At first it feels uncomfortable. Your words may feel weak, your sentences may feel broken, your thoughts may not come out clearly. But this is not failure, this is training. This is your brain learning how to move, how to respond, how to connect thought and language in real time. And the more you speak, the more your brain adapts. It begins to find words faster, it begins to connect ideas more smoothly, it begins to build confidence naturally. But if you avoid speaking and stay only in the comfort of listening and watching, that adaptation never happens. You have to understand this clearly. Input gives you knowledge, but output gives you fluency. Input fills your mind, but output trains your brain. Input shows you the language, but output forces you to use it. And without using it, your fluency will always feel incomplete. There is also another layer to this problem. When you consume too much and produce too little, your brain becomes passive. It gets used to receiving instead of creating. It waits for information instead of generating it. And this habit makes speaking feel even harder because now your brain is not only untrained, it is also unprepared for action. But the moment you start producing, everything begins to shift. Your brain wakes up. It becomes active. It starts searching, forming, connecting. It starts working in a new way. At first, it may feel slow. You may struggle to express simple ideas. You may repeat words. You may pause. But every time you push through that moment and continue speaking, you are strengthening a skill that cannot be built in silence. You don't need long speeches. You don't need perfect sentences. You just need consistent output. Small, daily moments where you use your voice, where you express your thoughts, where you stay in English and allow your brain to work. You can talk to yourself about your day, describe what you are doing, explain your thoughts out loud, respond to imaginary questions, or even repeat ideas in your own words. It doesn't matter how simple it is. What matters is that you are producing, because every time you produce, you reduce the gap between knowing and speaking. You shorten the distance between thought and expression. You train your brain to move faster, to respond naturally, to stay inside the language without escaping, and slowly something begins to change. Your words start coming out more easily, your pauses become shorter. Your confidence begins to grow without forcing it. Speaking starts to feel less like a challenge and more like a habit. This is when fluency begins to take shape. Not because you learned something new, but because you finally started using what you already knew. You have to let go of the idea that understanding is enough. It is not. Understanding is only the first step. Real progress begins when you take that understanding and turn it into expression. So don't just listen, speak. Don't just watch, respond. Don't just understand, express. Because the moment you balance input with output, the moment you give your voice the same attention as your ears, the moment you stop being only a learner and start becoming a speaker, that is the moment your fluency stops feeling stuck and starts moving forward. Your mind keeps switching. So it never learns to stay in English. There is a quiet habit happening inside your mind that most learners never pay attention to. And it is one of the biggest reasons why fluency feels slow, unstable, and incomplete. Throughout your day, your brain is constantly moving between languages. One moment you are thinking in English, the next moment you return to your native language, then again you try English, and then again you switch back. This constant movement feels natural because it is comfortable, but in reality it is preventing your brain from fully adapting to English. Every time you switch back to your native language, your brain relaxes into what it already knows. It goes back to speed, clarity, and confidence, and because that feeling is easier, your mind prefers it. But at the same time, every time you leave English too quickly, you interrupt the learning process. You break the connection that was just starting to form. You stop the adjustment that your brain was trying to make. Fluency does not grow in short, broken moments. It grows in continuity. It grows when your brain stays inside one language long enough to begin thinking, reacting, and expressing without needing support from another language. But if you keep switching, your brain never reaches that stage. It never fully commits. It never fully adapts. This is why you may feel like you understand English. You may even feel like you are improving, but when it comes to speaking, something still feels missing. Your thoughts are not stable. Your sentences are not smooth. Your mind still searches for help from your native language. And that dependency keeps you from moving forward. Think about it in a simple way. If you keep opening and closing a door, you never fully enter the room. You remain at the edge, half inside and half outside. That is exactly what is happening with your English. You are touching it, but not staying in it. You are using it, but not living in it. For your brain to truly change, it needs immersion, not in the sense of moving to another country, but in the sense of creating uninterrupted space where English becomes your only option. When your brain realizes that there is no quick escape, no switching back, it begins to work differently. It starts searching deeper. It starts forming thoughts directly. It starts building new pathways instead of relying on old ones. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. Your thoughts may feel slow. You may struggle to express simple ideas. You may feel like you are losing clarity. But this discomfort is not a problem. It is a sign that your brain is stretching beyond its comfort zone. It is a sign that something new is being built. Most people run away from this feeling. The moment it becomes difficult, they switch back to their native language and instantly they feel relief. But that relief comes at a cost. It stops growth. It keeps the brain in its old pattern. It keeps fluency out of reach. If you want to move forward, you have to stay a little longer in that uncomfortable space. You have to allow your brain to struggle without escaping. You have to let it search for words, even if it takes time. You have to let it build sentences slowly without going back for help. Because every time you stay, even when it feels hard, your brain becomes stronger. You can start with small periods of time. Choose moments in your day where you decide that you will think only in English. While walking, while eating, while doing simple tasks, keep your mind inside the language. Describe what you see, what you feel, what you plan to do. Keep it simple, but keep it consistent. The goal is not perfection. The goal is presence. As you continue this practice, something begins to change. The need to switch becomes weaker. Your brain starts staying longer in English without effort. Your thoughts begin to form more quickly. Your sentences become more connected. You start to feel a sense of stability that was not there before. And then slowly you reach a point where English no longer feels like something separate from you. It begins to feel like a space you can stay in, not just visit. Your mind becomes calmer. Your speech becomes smoother. Your confidence grows naturally because your brain is no longer divided between two systems. This is when fluency begins to feel real. Not because you learned more words. Not because your grammar became perfect. But because your mind finally stopped switching and started staying. You have to understand this deeply. Your brain adapts to what it experiences the most. If it experiences constant switching, it becomes good at switching. But if it experiences staying, it becomes good at thinking and speaking in that language. So stop leaving English too quickly. Stop escaping the moment it feels difficult. Stay a little longer. Think a little deeper. Speak even if it feels slow. Because every second you remain inside the language, you are building something powerful. You are building a mind that does not depend on translation. You are building a voice that does not hesitate. You are building a form of fluency that feels natural, stable, and real. And once your mind learns how to stay, your words will begin to flow without effort. You still see yourself as someone who can't speak English fluently. There is one final layer to your struggle that is deeper than methods, deeper than practice, deeper than everything you have tried so far. It is not about what you know. It is not about how much you practice. It is about how you see yourself. Right now, somewhere inside your mind, there is a quiet belief. You may not say it out loud, but it is there. I am not fluent. I struggle to speak. I am not confident in English. And this belief does not just stay in your thoughts. It shapes your behavior. It controls how you act every time you try to speak. Before you even begin a sentence, your mind has already decided how it will go. It expects hesitation. It expects mistakes. It expects difficulty. And because of that expectation, your brain prepares for struggle instead of flow. This is why sometimes you know exactly what you want to say, but you still hesitate. This is why even simple sentences feel harder than they should. This is why your confidence drops before you even start speaking. Because you are not just speaking English, you are acting out an identity. An identity that says, I am someone who cannot speak fluently. And the moment you carry that identity, everything becomes heavier. Your thoughts become slower. Your voice becomes weaker. Your actions become smaller. Not because you lack ability, but because your belief is limiting your expression. You have to understand this clearly. Your brain always tries to stay consistent with what you believe about yourself. If you believe you are not fluent, Your brain will behave in a way that proves that belief. It will hesitate more, it will doubt more, it will hold back more, it will focus on mistakes instead of progress. And this creates a cycle that feels impossible to break. You struggle, so you believe you are not fluent, and because you believe that, you continue to struggle. But the moment this belief begins to change, everything else begins to change with it. When you start to see yourself differently, your actions follow. Your brain begins to respond in a new way. Your voice becomes stronger. Your hesitation becomes smaller. Your confidence starts growing naturally without forcing it. This does not mean pretending to be perfect. It does not mean lying to yourself. It means shifting your identity from limitation to growth. Instead of saying, "I can't speak fluently," you begin to say, "I am becoming fluent." This small shift changes everything because now every time you speak, you are no longer trying to prove your weakness. You are expressing your progress. You are allowing yourself to improve in real time. You are giving your brain permission to move forward instead of staying stuck. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. Your old thoughts may still appear. You may still feel doubt. But now, you are aware of it. And instead of accepting it, you start challenging it. You speak anyway, you continue anyway, you show up anyway. And every time you do that, you are rewriting the belief inside your mind. You are proving to yourself that you are capable. You are building a new identity not through words but through action. Slowly, this new identity becomes stronger, and you begin to notice that you hesitate less. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to speak without overthinking every word. Not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer see yourself as someone who is stuck. You see yourself as someone who is growing. And growth has a completely different energy. It is patient, it is consistent, it is confident even in imperfection. This is the mindset that creates real fluency, not pressure, not fear, not perfection, but belief combined with action. Because when you believe you are becoming fluent, you start behaving like someone who is on the path, not someone who is failing. And that behavior leads to progress. And that progress strengthens your belief even more. This is how the cycle changes. You act, you improve, you believe more, and you act again. Until one day, you realize something has shifted completely. You are no longer thinking about whether you are fluent or not. You are no longer questioning your ability. You are simply speaking naturally, freely, without that heavy voice of doubt in your mind. And in that moment, you understand something powerful. Fluency was never just about language. It was about identity. The moment you stopped seeing yourself as someone who can't speak was the moment you finally started speaking. Right now, take a moment and be honest with yourself. All this time, you thought you were stuck. You thought you were not good enough. You thought maybe English just isn't for you. But now you can see the truth more clearly. You were never broken. You were never incapable. You were simply trained in a way that made speaking feel difficult. And once you understand that, something inside you begins to change. Because if the problem was the method, then the solution is already in your hands. Everything you need is already inside you. The words are there. The understanding is there. You are not starting from zero. You are just learning how to unlock what has been waiting inside you this whole time. And from this moment forward, things can be different. The next time you speak, don't try to be perfect. Just speak. The next time you feel stuck, don't go silent, just continue. The next time fear shows up, don't listen to it, just move through it. Because every small moment where you choose to speak instead of hesitate, you are changing your brain. You are building your fluency. You are becoming someone new. And one day, and sooner than you think, you will be in a conversation and you will realize something quietly powerful. You are not translating anymore. You are not overthinking anymore. You are not holding yourself back anymore. You are simply speaking. And it feels natural. It feels easy. It feels like it was always meant to be this way. That moment will not come from luck. It will come from the small decisions you make starting today. So don't wait for confidence. Don't wait for the perfect time. Start now. Because the voice you've been searching for is already yours. If this made you see your struggle in a new way, then you're already moving forward. You don't need to rush. You don't need to be perfect. Just stay consistent with what you learned today. And if you want to keep improving step by step in a way that actually works, then stay connected here. Because this is not just about learning English. This is about finally speaking with confidence, without fear, without overthinking. So take a small step today, and I'll see you in the next one.